There have been some good movies made about monkeys and some bad movies made about monkeys, but certainly one of the better is 1968's Planet of the Apes. While it's a film that has been mocked and parodied by almost everyone in the world since its release, it was still a bold and expensive experiment on the part of 20th Century Fox. It was such a big hit that the studio made 4 more films in the series to progressively diminishing returns, and last year also threw in a prequel film, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is in the running for best film of the series. Somewhere in the middle there, though, they also decided to give Tim Burton $100 million to make a remake of the original film. It made a lot of money, but it also made a lot of people wish they could have their money back.
Take your stinking hands off me, you damn dirty human!
Both films deal, of course, with the plight of a wandering astronaut who crash lands on a planet full of talking apes.
Smile.
One film uses this bizarre setting as a way to comment on racial inequalities in American society and the danger of letting religious fanatics run a government.
It's a madhouse! A madhouse!
The other one just wants to see apes getting blowed up real good. In this video, we'll break down the 2 films and declare a winner once and for all. Where do they stack up against each other? Let's find out on the latest edition of Remake Rematch. Best protagonist. Mark Wahlberg's Captain Leo Davidson is a man of action, albeit a poor one. He teases the monkeys that are under his care and doesn't seem to be a particularly good trainer, given their track record.
You're teasing him.
State-of-the-art monkey, you can handle it.
He disobeys a direct order not to launch his spaceship into a dangerous zone of space, which of course causes him to disappear and crash land on the titular Planet of the Apes. So he's not the sharpest stick in the stick box already, and that's before he gets caught by ape slavers and forced into servitude. He's captured for all of 25 minutes of the film before he breaks out, starts a guerrilla insurrection, pardon the pun, and eventually leads the forces of humanity in a war against the apes that oppress them. Too bad for him that his tactical planning is fairly poor and that he has to rely on the appearance of a Deus Ex Machina in order to win the final battle. Charlton Heston, on the other hand, puts in a bit of a sillier performance as Taylor in the 1968 original. He has a near constant smirk as he surveys the land in front of him, but he's also a bit of a philosopher.
I can't help thinking somewhere in the universe there has to be something better than man. Has to be.
When the time comes to take action, he rarely hesitates, even though his attempts at escape are rarely as successful as Davidson's.
Look, it's a man!
Despite his dire situation, he makes a bit of time for the ladies, but also ensures that there's opportunity to skinny dip and groan with the rest of his male companions before they're all captured by the apes. The biggest difference between he and Davidson, though, is that Taylor is forced to engage his opponents on the battlefield of ideas.
Why do men have no souls? What is the proof that a divine spark exists in the simian brain? Huh?
Taylor repeatedly castigates the blindness of the religious leaders of the apes and the refusal to engage his scientific arguments.
But you do it out of fear, remember that? Remember that? Because you're afraid of me! What are you afraid of, Doctor?
He is, of course, in the right, but in the end can't fight against the entrenched opinions of opponents and can only hope to run away. Although he fails, that failure is somehow more poignant than Davidson's attempt to win his battle by blowing up all monkeys everywhere. And the winner is 1968. Best Science. The original film has an interesting grasp on scientific principles, what with the story beginning with 4 human beings on a trip into deep space. What's confusing is that they've apparently been sent up into space to test something called Dr. Heislein's theory of time by traveling at near the speed of light. That is, of course, better known as Einstein's theory of relativity, and can easily be proven correct without leaving Earth's atmosphere. So it's a bit strange that the American Space Organization of the film has to send a bunch of dudes to another solar system to ensure its correctness.
This much is probably true. The men who sent us on this journey are long since dead and gone.
Still, it's a solid if basic use of science, so hey, points. The remake, however, is one of those turn-of-the-century sci-fi films that rely on a fair amount of science that's tenuous at best.
Activate reading systems.
Right off the bat, we're shown a massive space station that Burton apparently thought was actually feasible to construct in less than 30 years after his film came out. The plot is aided by the passage through that ultimate scientific cheat, the stable wormhole. What's more, everyone who goes through it winds up traveling to a different point in time, with the largest vessel apparently winding up hundreds of years in the past, but Davidson and his chimp arriving within days of each other. Lastly, the apes and chimps in the film apparently have the power to throw people 40 feet in the air with a single punch and leap around like grasshoppers. It gets more and more ridiculous as the film goes on, and that's saying something when a film begins as outlandishly as this one does. The winner is, again, 1968.
I leave the 20th century with no regrets.
Best Villain. The villains on the remake consist of notorious General Thade, played by Tim Roth, and his second-in-command Attar, played by Michael Clark Duncan.
They are weak without you, sir.
A better film would have made more use of these two, but Thade comes across as a shallow, power-hungry martinet who asks for martial law to be declared at the most minor crisis.
Give me absolute power.
He flips out somewhat literally when things don't go his way, and his fate is to wind up cowering under a desk at the end of the film. He's a bit too ridiculous to really take seriously. Even the obligatory cameo by Charlton Heston as Thade's father is a bit ridiculous, as Heston hands off, what else, a gun to his son.
Has the power of 1,000 spears.
Dr. Zaius, on the other hand, is a frighteningly good antagonist for Taylor. He's not a violent sociopath like Thade, but he is a hypocrite. He knows full well that the humans predated the arrival of apes on his planet, but hides that knowledge under a veil of religious mysticism to prevent it from spreading and potentially throwing his society into upheaval. He embraces trials that have no possible outcome other than a guilty verdict.
He's not being tried, he's being disposed of.
He destroys evidence that would prove the side of his opponents, and he presides over a racist social structure that keeps chimpanzees permanently below their ape betters. In the end, though, he knows precisely what he's doing and justifies his actions as being for the best for his society, which makes him perhaps even more evil than Thade is. He's one of the smarter villains you'll find in a science fiction film.
What about the future?
I may just have saved it for you.
The winner is, again, 1968!
What will he find out there, Doctor?
His destiny.
Best Ending. The 1968 film is rightly regarded as a classic for its twist ending, which sees Taylor finally coming to the awful realization that he's been on Earth all along. It's a bit melodramatic, of course, and audiences now are so familiar with it before they've even seen the film that it loses a bit of its impact, but it's still an iconic moment in the history of science fiction film.
He did it.
You maniacs! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
The remake, of course, falters yet again, with a confusing twist ending. After a needlessly silly final battle between the humans and the apes, in which Davidson blows a bunch of them to hell and back with an ancient rocket engine, the fight turns out to be almost completely pointless when his pet chimp lands and stops the war single-handedly. Davidson manages to take off from the planet in his magical space pod, heads through the wormhole, and finds himself back on Earth? Only it's not Earth at all. It's the same planet he was on in the past, where Thade apparently ruled the planet with a grip of iron. It makes no sense at all, but it gives Burton another chance to mimic the original film without retaining any of its charm, which of course he takes. I had never seen the original Planet of the Apes before beginning this video, and even today it still stands up as a witty commentary on the social and philosophical ills of the culture that spawned it. Its Star Trek-ish theory that science should take primacy over religion in the spheres of government and social policy is one that I seriously doubt we'd see espoused in a big-budget film today. And for that alone, it deserves credit for being somewhat groundbreaking. But hey, don't take my word for it. Look at the big-budget remake that came out 3 decades after it. Tim Burton's remake almost completely ignores the social and scientific musings of the original film, instead replacing them with simple repetitions of the famous lines from that film and a bunch of incredibly generic action. Okay, maybe Helena Bonham Carter is pretty good as the token scientist Ari. But aside from that, we're subjected to 2 hours of Mark Wahlberg's muscles and Estella Warren somehow having boatloads of makeup on despite being a slave in a primitive society. It's pretty stupid, and as such, the winner is, in a rare clean sweep, the original film. And that'll do it for another edition of Remake Rematch, but have no fear, at the rate at which remakes are coming out recently, we're never gonna run out of candidates. We'll be back for another edition of Remake Rematch soon, here on Screened.com.